Thanks, Mark Ryan. I'm Senior Director of Product Management at Zscaler. I'm going to run you through Zscaler Private Access Public API infrastructure in today's session. Just briefly, we'll run through the safe harbor. Obviously, don't purchase Zscaler based on our forward-looking statements. But to cover our API, we're currently in the beta process for it, which is what I'm going to use today for my demonstration. And within Q2, we're expecting this to go generally available. So what do we mean by API? Everything that Zscaler Private Access does is essentially based on API. When you enroll a connector, there's an API call. Everything in the user interface is an API call today. What we're going to do is we're going to expose some of that API infrastructure for customers, for partners to be able to use the API to do certain functions. And those functions will go into configuration management, so being able to create application segments, create segment groups, create servers, create server groups, pull information about connectors, because connectors can then be used for server groups, create policy, and all of those kind of things. Things that are kind of useful for that are then the integration. So can we use the API to integrate with ServiceNow or Salesforce.com and picture out that workflow so that when somebody requests access to an application through ServiceNow, for example, that can be automatically or through some form of human interaction approved, and then drive the configuration change within ZPA. And that might be a group membership. User becomes a member of a group and we do something based on that. That might then be a SCIM update to Zscaler, so the group automatically goes through, or it might be configuring a new application based on that request. So there's a whole workflow that can then be built around this. Things that are not going to be included in the API. Firstly, we're not managing connectors. We're not provisioning connectors or managing connector provisioning keys through the API today. Obviously, everything that we do with connectors needs to be done securely, and you're generating a provisioning key that joins your tenant. So we need to make sure that that process is robust when we release that functionality. The other thing we're not doing is reporting. And when I say reporting, you're not able to download the logs via the API. If you want to get logs out of Zscaler Private Access, use the log streaming server to stream to your SIM or your SOAR solution. You can filter that data natively. It'll use the connector to get that data there. It's a more efficient way of doing it than in some respects an API call to then pull down a lot of data from there. So those are kind of the caveats. That's where we are with the API. And I think what I'll do is I'll jump into a bit of a demonstration and show you some of that functionality working. If I can get my mouse working. There we go. Right. So let's get rid of this. Good place to start. Let's start with the administration interface. We'll sign in. I'm on the beta cloud, as I said, and we're going to use the beta cloud for all of this demonstration. So the first thing you'll notice, we have public API and API keys down here. You can generate a new API key. Let's put me down in the bottom right-hand corner. Talk about myself in the third person. So when you add a new API key, give it a name. It'll generate a client ID for you, and then it will display the password. So the password will only be generated once. So similar if you're used to AWS and their API management, if you lose the passphrase, you'll need to regenerate it to go from there. To get a new passphrase. So once I've got that, then I can do things like I can log into the API. So we've got this Swagger portal. Everything for the API is under config.zpabeta.net. Log in there with your client ID and your client secret. And then you'll be able to see all of the endpoints that are associated or available to you. So you can see here, as I said, app server, how do we define servers? Everything you'll see here will be clear as a CRUD function, so I can create, I can read, I can update, and I can delete, but I also have the ability to get all app servers that are configured. The same with applications. I can create segment groups to group applications together to apply policy. I can read the connector groups, but I can't create connector groups. So you need to be able to read them to associate them with server groups. I can do things around my browser access certificates, so I can read the certificates. I can't upload them through the API today. If you're doing anything with Cloud Connector, obviously Cloud Connector is also a directional feature. We're going through some testing of that today, but it'll be generally available later this year. But this enables me to read all that information about the cloud connectors. IDP, again, I can read my identity provider and then the attributes around it. Machine groups for pre-Windows logon. I can read my policy, so I can get all the global policies, the re-authentication policies, and then I'm going to start to build policy around the application segments I create. Posture is obviously important to be able to read the posture from mobile admin and enforce that on my policy, and then my SAML attributes and SCIM attributes to apply policy around there, and then the server groups. So you've got all these different endpoints, and then I can use that to build my policy. We have an API guide. This is available as a PDF document. Talks you through the model clauses and everything, what's necessary, what's required to build out the API, and that essentially links through to our help portal. So this is the help information about the public API, and it'll talk you through what's necessary to create an application segment, how we build those out. This is currently internal only, but this will shortly be available publicly to read. And it walks you through all the different model clauses, how to build them out, how to make those requests. So rather than go through all of this today, I think it's probably better to do a bit of a demonstration. So I've got kind of two use cases to run through today. The first one I'm going to talk to is Active Directory. Active Directory can be complex, number one. Number two, it is invariably the one application that every customer has, or most customers have. And number three, because of its complexity and depending on the size of your organization, it's something that's very easy to get wrong, or let's say we wrong to miss things and go through that. So API gives us a mechanism to query Active Directory and programmatically update the application segments. So I've got a couple of things in my script here. I'm using Python. Some would argue that some of my coding is not brilliant, but if it works, don't worry about it. So I've got my my endpoint. I'm going to get some input about my Active Directory domains. I've got a bunch of modules that I'm going to import, specifically this one, server lookup. And then I build out my different URLs, my endpoints based on this. So I know my customer ID. I'll just very quickly jump back to where you can find that, which is under administration and then company. Here's my tenant ID, and I set all my variables. So I'm just going to very quickly set my environment variables, which sets my the client ID, client secret, and customer ID, and then I can read those in the script. So what this is going to do, it's going to log in and it's going to get my bearer token from the logon process, and then it's going to query Active Directory, and it's going to specifically query for the LDAP TCP at the root of my domain, and that's going to list all of the domain controllers. And I can show you this if I do a dig srv _LDAP _TCP.mydomain welshgeek.net. You can see there I've got a whole load of domain controllers. This is telling me that my domain controllers are listening on port 88 for TCP, Kerberos. In fact, it should be 389. You can see that I've done these incorrectly, and the weight 100. The only one that is correct is this one, which is my real AD server. But this is a demonstration, so you don't need to worry about it. And then it will resolve a handful of them, or it'll do the A record lookup for them. So once it's done that, you know, I've got a list of my domain controllers, and I'm going to build those in. I'm going to concatenate these into a string, which I will use later on. And then I also build a string, two different strings, the TCP ports and the UDP ports. And you can look this up in the Zscaler help, but we talk about what is necessary for Active Directory if you're going to define it. TCP and UDP port 88 for Kerberos, 135, 137, 138, 139 for network drives, SMB, for remote procedure calls. And then we get the 2389s, LDAP and CLDAP, the connectionless LDAP that's necessary for domain enumeration. And then the ports that are necessary, map network drives, Kerberos password change, LDAP-S, as well as the LDAP ports, the global catalog on LDAP and LDAP-S, and then the high ports that are necessary for the RPC process. So once we build those out, then I can start to build my connector group. So, or my server group. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to query and do a get, return back all of the connectors that are in my tenant. And then what I will do is I will build a server group that includes all of them. Now in my example, I've got connectors in a couple of different places. It doesn't necessarily follow that all of them can see my AD. So doing something like naming your connectors with a format that invariably tells you whether or not they can see the domain or not, I could then filter these based on name, and then programmatically build them out, or I could put flags on there. This is obviously going to be subjective based on your tenant and whatever. But once I've done that, I can create the server group, and then I can build my application group. Application group in my case is going to be empty. I build a new application group called Active Directory, and that builds there. And then what I will do, let me just put on word wrap on here so you can see everything that's going on. So this will then, let me move me out of the way again. So here's an application. It includes all of the FQDNs from here, all of the ports from here, FQDNs. Here are my TCP ports and UDP ports, and then I will post them and get the answer back. So very simple. So if I come to the command line here, and before we get going, what I will do is I think it's, so you can see the effects, providing everything works correctly. So I've got in my domain, I've got a start.welshgeek.net for admin, which is only 3389 and 22, so remote desktop and SSH. I've got another one which is wildcard for drives, so I can map network drive support 445, but I can't do anything else. And then I've got a bunch of Linux servers which are only open on 80 and 443, so it's a very restrictive configuration. But let's go ahead and we'll run that Active Directory script. And so all I need to do is input welshgeek.net, which the script will use for that DNS lookup. And it clearly didn't like my environment variables because I didn't enter it correctly. There we go. It's properly read the environment variables. It's done the DNS lookup. It should now have gone and created all of the application segments that we needed. So let's refresh this page. So now I have my Active Directory servers. It contains 52 applications, which are all of my domain controllers here. All the right TCP and UDP ports. It's in a segment group of its own, and it's in a server group that identifies both of my connector groups that can service it. And obviously dynamic server discovery is on because that's a requirement. So I've gone and defined Active Directory, really simple, no input from the user necessary. You can automate the domain. So let's take it another one, because the other one that I see a lot of is SAP, and SAP is a bit of a can be a bit of a pain. And the reason why I say it's a pain, it's very, again, subjective to your configuration, dependent upon how you configure to access the SAP service by an IP address, by a short name, or by an FQDN. And you're never going to really know. And for me, helping customers deploy, it changes day by day, or different customer. And the easiest way to figure it out is have SAP working, take a packet capture, analyze the packet capture, and create the policy based on the result. And so what this does is it asks me for a domain suffix. I know that my domain is welshgeek.net. I can input a packet capture. I'm going to use T-Shark, which is the text-based version of Wireshark, with an SAP plugin, and it's going to pull out the whole list of attributes from the packet capture. What are the name of the servers? What are the IP addresses of the servers? What are the ports that those servers are listening on? And it sticks that in a JSON file. And then I do the same thing. I log on to my ZPA tenant. I read in the SAP file, and I iteratively go through it and extract the ones that are online, or that are enabled, the host names, the IP addresses, and the ports. And then I add those into a set. I look for uniqueness because I don't want to have duplicates, so I solve that problem. And then I build the FQDNs and ports in exactly the same way, or more or less the same way that I did for Active Directory. And then I go ahead and I create the connector groups. I create the server groups, create the application group, the application segment, again, based on the same parameters. So it's relatively the same once I've got the data out of my packet capture. So let's go ahead and do that. So we can run the same Python script, and we call it SAP create. My domain suffix is welshgeek.net. I've got a packet capture called sap.pcapng. Same time, this one actually prints to the screen. It tells you the name of each of these FQDNs. Remember, everything Zscaler does is based on FQDN, or Zscaler Private Access. So even though you might access the application as a short name, you need to append the suffix to create an FQDN. If you access by an IP address, obviously not, and here are my ports. So we've gone ahead and we've created those. So you also need to make sure for SAP that I have the domain suffix welshgeek.net. That's what creates from a short name into an FQDN. And now if my script is run properly, I should now see an application segment called SAP servers. We take a look at those applications. It's got those 3 IP addresses and the 3 FQDNs. We've got all the ports that it's running on. 3216 to 3216, 3215 to 3215, 3200 to 3200. That's probably just something just to notice in here. I actually echo it twice to the string because ZPA wants to know ranges. So if you duplicate it, it's 1 to 1, which means it's just one port. Again, link to the segment group and the server group. We don't really need to duplicate all the server groups, but you know, it's just for me, it's a bit of a good practice, but it will make things a bit convoluted when if you get hundreds of them. So there we go. I've now got programmatically, based on 2 different things: a DNS lookup or a packet capture. I've built some application segments. My Active Directory will just work. My SAP will just work. I could build this into my SIM and take logs, analyze the logs, and then programmatically create the application segments on the back of that. Hope this was useful. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. I'm going to hand over to our next presenter, who I think is Moinal. Thank you very much.